Hey guys, I have a quick question for you. Have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? If so, well, you might want to consider Anchor. So when Jesse and I first started doing this, we had a lot of questions. We had no idea what we were doing. How do we record an episode? How do we even get it out there to people? And truth be told, Anchor, which is the app we use to record this, made all of this incredibly simple. We are both what you could call technologically challenged, and we can use this with simplicity. So if you've always wanted to start a podcast, just go to anchor.fm/start. You can make a profile, and honestly, you can start recording probably within 5 minutes. Hit an upload button, and it automatically adds it to all these platforms that you listen to us on. So again, that's anchor.fm/start, and you can get started right away. What's up, guys? Another week here. We're going to dig into today some of, some of the facts and info around like cutting, or as we commonly hear, shredding. Because we know summertime's coming, the weather's getting a bit warmer, and we know that that's going to start to surface soon.
Yeah, especially there's just like a little shift in like focus for advertisements and marketing and social media stuff, and just conversation around whether it's joking or not, I think isn't really relevant. Sometimes when things are said that kind of tug on people's insecurities, it makes them feel not awesome. I mean, we had 2 full episodes designated to just trying to kind of debunk and increase your awareness of like bullshit stuff.
That's true.
To stay away from, because this time of year, the marketing for that stuff's going to go way through the roof. So you're going to see gyms start to market like get your summer body back.
Yeah.
Shred for summer shred, beach bod, whatever. Don't do it, right? We've had 2 full episodes talking about this. Gyms, stop it. And then for you listening, or for you, the consumer, don't go that direction, because you know that approach isn't going to be something that is a long-term, fun, healthy endeavor for you. It's going to be very short-term, miserable, and not going to make you feel very well, mentally very well. Physically, maybe you feel okay. I don't know. It depends. But mentally is more important.
One thing I always forget is that living in Canada, we do go through those seasonal fluctuations where obviously, I mean, half the year it's freezing cold and we don't want to be outside with anything less than a winter jacket and warm ass pants and big boots. And the other season you're outside half naked. So The point of this is I forget that like the other half, I don't know, it's probably not half, but anyways, a huge majority of people in North America, like that's their year round, is being outside in the sun, half naked, soaking up the rays.
Yeah.
So I wonder, like, do they see a flip in marketing like this, or I wonder if they just kind of support that all year round? Like, hey, beach season, never ends.
Yeah. That'd be a cool
I don't know.
social experiment to see how that all works out for sure. You gotta wonder, right? I feel like here also just general activity levels in the winter is so low for the most part, because it sucks.
Yeah.
I'm a winter hater, so I'll complain all winter long, and then as soon as it's summertime, I will not say a single word. Whether if I'm just like sweating, sitting still, I can't complain, because I spend all winter complaining about how terrible it is. So that's my rule. And then I'm allowed to complain as much as I want through the winter. But like general activity stuff goes down in the winter. You tend to go more towards the heartier meals.
Yes.
Because it makes you feel full and warm and comfy and cozy. So I don't know.
I'd be interested to see like a population-wide average weight, maybe, or average like caloric intake, to see if that actually changes by season, or if this is all just like a kind of a notion that we've somehow developed and just isn't even true at all.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Totally. Think about, go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to say, because I mean, if in the winter season, like even if you are cold more often than you are in the summer, that means you're actually going to be burning more calories right there alone. Like just by being cold more often than not, your body's going to try and heat you up, and that's going to burn extra calories.
Oh, right, yeah.
So I don't know if that would like offset things, or if we really are eating extra.
Yeah.
If they're more active, less active one season the other. I don't know.
Yeah. And in the summer, I know for me, like I would drink a lot more in the summer than I do in the winter.
Yeah, true.
Because the environment's just different. Like if I'm at a pool hanging out with my friends, like I'll have a couple drinks where normally if I was over there I wouldn't. Or a campfire, same thing.
Yep.
So maybe that increases the caloric intake a little bit. Yeah, there's a lot of factors there. It'd be cool to see if there's some sort of analysis. I'm sure it would just be like a,
report.
Yeah. Not necessarily a study, but more of like a survey sort of thing.
Canada or something.
Yeah.
And then the only people filling those out are the people who are active, and
yeah, those are so biased.
That's a whole other rabbit hole.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit too. People that are filling out the surveys. It's the same as like Yelp reviews.
Yep.
Not always the best ones to go off of there. But yeah, cutting's a big thing. Like cutting and so weight cutting and things like that for health and longevity compared to like cutting for sport are obviously going to be two very different conversations because for sport, health isn't necessarily a priority all the time. It should be. And talking about that bounce back effect that you have some gems on that you were talking about before we started recording are obviously dangerous for sports. So sports that would have cutting, like combat sports for the most part, any physique type sport, bodybuilding, figure, things like that. And then sometimes people that are just doing it to look good will take on the extreme practices of these sports and try to apply them to their lifestyle to get shredded for summer or to get that beach body. And obviously that there's some dangers with that. It's because you got to think most of these athletes that are at the level where they have to cut for a combat sport or they have to cut for some sort of bodybuilding thing, I'd like to hope that they have some sort of nutritionist or a coach guiding them through that process to mitigate some of the negative effects of that. But I mean, that's not always the case on the amateur level.
Right.
So yeah, kind of.
Yeah, that's an interesting subject. We'll obviously get more into that as we go on in this episode, but
yeah,
I mean, that was actually more so where we came up with the idea for this episode, isn't it? We were kind of chatting a little bit about like the whole bodybuilding, physique competition realm. We were talking about like MMA sports, people cutting to meet a weight class. And then we just realized like, oh, hey, summertime and spring is coming. So this is a really good, relevant topic for right now. Because I mean, all that being said, does your body and brain know whether you're cutting for a sport or whether you're cutting for warmer weather? Probably not.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of overlap and similarities here.
Yeah, for sure. Could probably group it together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You had something about a recent workout.
Yeah. I guess before we get too far into our actual topic, the Rogue Invitational released a workout. I forget which one it is for Sunday morning, maybe. It's Dan Bailey announcing the video. And it's a biathlon. So concept 2 ski erg, and then literally shooting an air rifle at targets.
Come on.
I shit you not. Here it is right
my
there.
God.
They're going to ski, lay down, and shoot an air rifle at a target.
That's questionable.
Too far.
Yeah.
Way too far.
That's stupid.
Very dumb. A biathlon is an amazing sport on its own.
Yeah.
CrossFit and fitness is not, that's a very specific skill for someone to have that is not related to fitness. Like shooting a gun is not related. It's like, let's have somebody do ski erg and then hit a golf ball.
Yeah.
Let's have somebody do ski erg and then try to hit a 90 mile an hour fastball or a change up or, a curveball. Let's have somebody do a ski erg. What else would kind of be something like that? And then throw a baseball. Or try to throw a touchdown pass. Like those are such specific skills to a sport That's not a testable piece for fitness. It's ridiculous.
America.
Oh my God. Could it be more America?
Written all over it.
So dumb.
Is the event sponsored by the military or something?
Oh, I can check with the sponsor. I think it's on the post.
All their signs must be camel.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Oh man.
I agree. The biathlon event in general, pretty insane.
Awesome.
In the Olympics, ridiculous that people do that.
Mm-hmm.
Not CrossFit.
No. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to test fitness, or are you trying to test like biathlon is a sport on its own?
Yeah.
There's a sport in the Olympics called the biathlon. That's not like
we're talking about shooting a fucking gun here.
Shooting a gun. That's a very specific skill that some guys, and girls, if they've been in that environment their whole life, they're going to do okay, probably. Yeah, it's cool because they have to be able to control their breathing and their heart rate and settle down their nerves and everything like that to make a good shot. But that's not what a fitness test needs. It's going to be ridiculous. Can you imagine being an athlete and have your shot at the CrossFit Games completely blindsided by the fact that you don't know how to shoot a gun?
Yeah.
Come on.
Not to mention it's not exactly one of those things where, I don't know, they release a new event with a slightly new movement pattern. So like just to give you an example, like when they started releasing events with handstand walking, like up and down ramps,
right?
People were like, okay, I need to adapt to this. Even if I don't have that exact object, I can make one like by stacking up some weights, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
This one, it's like, so you want me to go buy a fucking gun? Like,
yeah.
It's not exactly an easy thing to get, nor is it cheap,
right.
Nor is it easy to go find a location to practice.
Yeah.
Like I'm just going to head out onto the balcony of my apartment building and shoot targets at the Rona. Hope I don't hit anyone. Like,
yeah.
That's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. And every gun's different, right? So it's some sort of air gun with this. It has a sight on top of the gun, which is different. Like you're not, there's so many different, like every gun's going to be a little bit different, has a little bit different trigger feel. It has, I don't know how this air gun's going to be loaded. Like, is it going to jam on somebody because it's a gun?
That's right. Yeah.
Right? Like they jam,
variable,
and air guns will jam way more often than your standard gun because they're toys. At the end of the day, it's a toy. Like, oh my God. It's ridiculous. Anyway, so that's where that's going. That's great. That's real concerning. There's always something. I love that CrossFit does so much shit that every single week we can start an episode with talk about what they've done.
It's true.
Keeps it entertaining, if nothing else. I don't know. I hope it's a joke. It wasn't on April Fool's, though.
We could have like a weekly, we'll call it a weekly, get your head out of your ass.
Yeah. Come on.
That's this week's edition.
Sure is. Their qualifier was great, too. That's the thing. Like, the programming for the qualifier was pretty good.
That's disappointing.
I liked it. And Rogue Invitational, they're going to have the best of the best out there, and they're going to ruin it by having them how to shoot an air gun. I don't want to watch that. I don't want to watch them. It's so boring to watch somebody do a ski erg.
Yeah.
And then they're going to lay down and shoot at targets. Like, I'm good. I want to watch some exercise racing.
Yeah, it's just another one of those things, like, stick to what you're good at.
Yeah.
Which is CrossFit movements and patterns and events, not trying to replicate a biathlon.
Yeah. Silly.
Riding a bike and running and all that, fine.
Sure.
Those are pretty standard human movements, I would say.
Yeah.
This, no.
And throwing curveballs in existing movements, like you said, like, handstand walking on an obstacle, parallel handstand push-ups, ring handstand push-ups, forcing people to adapt to those things on the fly. Okay, sure, because it's something that everyone has access to.
Yeah.
Like you said, somebody could make the obstacle. Everyone has a set of rings. If they're at that level, they're very proficient on the rings, and their gymnastics or at least have some sort of base, right? They can do muscle ups, you can do all that sort of thing. So yeah, that's too much, too far. too far. Let's bring her back a little bit.
Yep. Where were we now?
Summer shred time.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't let people bully you guys, basically. Don't. There's going to be a lot out there that are going to tug on your insecurities or your shortcomings or perceived shortcomings or what somebody else thinks that you should or shouldn't be doing. That shouldn't matter.
Yeah.
But there's situations where people do want to go through a cut, and no matter what we say, not going to change your mind. Because, I mean, the best thing to do is just wait 2 years. Right, like go through the whole process of training and exercise and experimenting with yourself in the fitness and nutrition realm and finding what works for you, and then you're at a physique that you're comfortable with and you feel healthy all year round. But that's going to fall on some deaf ears, so
yeah,
let's get into it a little bit.
Yeah, and my issue isn't even necessarily with. So I mean, first of all, let me start like. Cutting means a lot of different things. I guess we should kind of clearly state that first. Like, so I don't really see an issue with cutting per se. That is, I don't really see an issue with people restricting calories to improve their body composition. But that's, I mean, in a healthy way. Like if you're doing that in a sustainable, healthy way, kudos, go for it. That's, I mean, that's 100% totally fine. My issue is, and again, it's most popular this time of year. Like the weather starts to get warmer. People, I think even maybe like a little bit of panic even sets in. Is that people realize all of a sudden far too late is that, oh shit, like I want to kind of, I want to get that summer physique, whatever. And then they go about this like rapid cut or shred, whatever you want to call it. And I don't think people realize that like, that can have some serious long-term consequences. And we've talked a little bit about this before, like The Biggest Loser is a classic example of this. We've brought this up many times, and is that an extreme example? Yeah, definitely. Like their resting metabolic rate is still way lower than where it should be, like 6 years later. They've done studies on this and they have showed that. And so, I mean, what I'm saying is if you don't want to mess up your hormones, if you don't want to make it difficult in the future to obtain a healthy body composition, then like Jesse said, you need to take a step back, kind of suck up your ego and take a healthy long-term approach to this. Not 3-4 weeks before a volleyball tournament is coming up, you all of a sudden decide, hey, I'm going to stop eating half of the amount of calories that I would normally eat. I'm going to slash my calories by 1,200 or something. See if I can get super shredded and then just kind of walk around with that physique all summer long.
Yeah. Replacing your meals with like tummy shaper shakes or whatever they're going to be marketed as, and hydroxycut pills to mask your hunger and things like that, right? So, I mean, what is doing it the right way then?
So it has to be gradual. So before we even get to cutting though, I mean, not everyone is in a position where they can cut in the first place. So this is another massive mistake. Like let's just take example person A, guy or girl who wants to get shredded for summer. But the first thing you have to look at is how many calories they're currently consuming. So if they're already consuming very, very low calories for their sex, for their body size, for their activity level, you can only cut so far. Like you can't, to give you some exact numbers here, a male, like just, again, this is very hypothetical, but a male of like average size, I'm using quotation marks here, average activity level that's consuming like 1,500 calories a day, like that is already low. Like you can't go any lower than that. So if you're eating 1,500 calories a day, not happy with your current body composition, you can't be cutting calories to get to that physique. On the other hand, females, I mean, roughly like, sure, maybe a little bit lower, but I mean, about the same number. Like if a female is already eating like 1,400 calories, again, you cannot go any lower than that.
Yeah.
So the first thing you have to kind of address is, do I even have a healthy, again, quote unquote, metabolism in the first place? If you are eating this low number of calories, your metabolism, I can't even say that today, is not healthy. And you need to work on increasing that resting metabolic rate. So how many calories you burn on a daily basis, you need to increase that to then be even able to be able to quote unquote cut. So that's the very first thing, most important. Because again, you can't go from like, if you're at 1,500 calories, you can't go down to 1,000. If you're at 1,200 calories, very common for females, unfortunately, to be eating that amount, you can't go down to like 800, 900 calories. Like that'll mess you the hell up.
Yeah. For your whole life.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be a constant battle to try to get back from that.
Yeah.
And then slowly trying to increase calories for that individual to get them back to a more of a healthy caloric intake. It's going to be a very big mental battle, and it's going to take probably months and years of back and forth coaching with that person in order to get them to a point where they feel comfortable enough with you to trust you that you're telling them the truth and they're not going to blow up like a balloon, which would be the big concern for them probably. And then working with a professional one-on-one to track and facilitate that increase.
Yeah. I was definitely very, very naive to this before I started getting more into this nutrition coaching business. Very naive to the fact that, and again, not to stereotype, but it is most common among females, is that this concept of like chronic exercise, so working out like minimum 6 days a week, like hard to not just like, not just going for like a 20-minute walk or something like that. Like they're doing like high intensity interval training. Doing this like 6 days a week. Maybe they have like a stressful job on top of that. And then to top things off, they're eating like 1,200 calories a day. And then wondering why they can't lose weight or reach even like a quote unquote healthy body composition in the first place. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's very, very common. And you've hit the nail on the head. Like it is very difficult to like have that individual trust that, hey, in order to improve your body composition, but like more importantly, just to actually feel better on a daily basis and improve your overall health, you're actually going to have to start eating more.
Right.
And getting them to appreciate that as you begin to eat more, you're not going to blow up like a balloon. In fact, often I've seen this before, like the opposite happens. If someone increases their calories, all of a sudden they're improving their body composition by going up. Like it's very counterintuitive, but I mean, there's a lot going on in the body at that time, but it's, if you want to like simplify things, it's basically, I mean, what it's doing is it's just making the body feel comfortable. That's kind of the simplest way to put it. I always say like the body has to feel comfortable before it can drop weight. And again, there's a lot more going on there, but that's kind of that kind of sums everything up, I would say.
Yeah, for sure. And that same person, the advice for the exercise would be to back off of that.
So that's a good point.
It's like we just need to get you onto a strength program.
Yeah.
And let your body, like you said, balance out. Because your body, that's all our bodies ever want to do, is to find balance and homeostasis. Yeah. That's what we're designed to do. And we just adapt in order to make that happen at different points in our life. No, that's a very difficult conversation to have sometimes. So.
That's a very good point, though, that you made that I totally forgot about, is that's another thing, is often you actually have to reduce the exercise volume.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this kind of, not that we were going to talk about this, but it's a good time to bring this up. Like, we wonder why the concept of, or not the concept, like this phenomenon of hypothyroidism is so common today. Mm-hmm. Well, it's because of this. That's literally how that develops. Not always, but very, very often, is through this chronic pattern of excess exercise, excess calorie restriction, but then I'm continuing to stress my body out with exercise, maybe lack of sleep, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm. You're just wearing your body systems down.
Yeah, that's all it is. Mm-hmm. No need to overcomplicate things.
Yeah. That sums it up right there.
Yeah. And again, like it's not one of those things that, you know, we kind of just like speculate about and think it's bad for you, yada, yada, yada. Like these are all things where we know exactly what's going on in the body and brain. Like when you're doing this, like we know about the change in signals. So we've talked a little bit about it before, is that like your fat cells. So I don't know if I've said this on the podcast before, but when you are losing fat, you're not actually losing fat cells themselves. Your fat cells just grow and shrink. So when you go down, let's say you go from like 15% body fat down to 8%, you're not actually losing fat cells. They're just shrinking. Now, that being said, can you actually lose and grow new fat cells? Yeah, but that's very, very difficult to do, and it's actually pretty rare. So that's another thing to look for, is like if someone tells you, you know, burn through all your old fat cells or whatever, that's, I mean, there's not a lot of truth to it. A little bit, but again, that's more of like an extreme example. That being said though, so we talked about this chronic pattern of constant calorie restriction, constant exercise, etc. So this is one of the scenarios where I said that it's very rare and difficult to actually grow new fat cells, but that is one of those circumstances where that can happen. So just to kind of break that down a little bit. So if you go through a series of very aggressive, rapid cuts, shreds, whatever you want to call them, and then you go through that like bounce back. So just to give you an example, say you like aggressively slash your calories by like over 1,000, and then and again, this isn't a short-term thing, like you're doing this over a long period of time. When you bounce back, sometimes in extreme examples, your body can actually, that's when it will grow new fat cells. Reason being is because if you have more fat cells, your body is more efficient at storing energy. So why would it want to become more efficient at storing energy? Because you have absolutely deprived it constantly over and over again in the past. So this is an adaptive mechanism where the body says, you've been stressing us out over and over again. We are in this constantly energy deprived state. We're going to grow these new fat cells so that when you do reintroduce calories, we can just kind of like slurp all that up as efficiently and as quickly as possible. So this is kind of like, this is the physiological mechanism actually behind yo-yo dieting, because it's just because you've literally developed this mechanism that makes it like significantly easier for your body to gain weight. So easier to gain weight also means in the future. So again, think shred, regain, shred, regain, shred, regain. Again, aggressively, not in a healthy, sustainable way. You're growing these new fat cells. Well, that also means in the future, those cuts are just going to become harder and harder and harder because now you have more fat cells that you have to shrink down.
Right. Then I'm thinking, excuse me, for that individual then, say if they've been going on this cycle for like 10 years. So it's like winter, we'll call it winter bulk, summer shred. Somebody's been doing this for 10 years. Year 10, they have to take, so year 1, minor changes, give them some sort of result that they're looking for. Year 5, it requires a little bit more of a drastic swing. And year 10, it's just so unhealthy and so crazy that there's just no coming back from it. So it's sort of that chronic yo-yo dieting sort of thing.
Yeah.
Like, all this acute stuff, like once or twice, right? Like your body's going to be okay. And even, especially if you do it the right way, which you have a lot of good points to share coming up about how to do that. But if you're doing this constantly to yourself, your body, you can only ask so much of your body, and it's all it's trying to do is survive. So the more stress you're placing on it, the more damage is done, and it's harder to come back from that.
Yeah. And so this is why I always wonder about maybe competitive fighters. I don't know. Like, I mean, they go through some pretty aggressive cuts. Like, so yeah, I wonder about them. Like, again, I can't say because I don't have like long-term experience with the same individual, right? That's been going through this for like 15, 20 years.
Right.
But you got to think like going through one or two even of those aggressive cuts per year, like you got to think that takes a toll on their overall like metabolic health in the long run. Because they're slashing like, we'd have to take a quick break here soon in like 30 seconds, but they're slashing like, I don't know, like 20, 30 pounds sometimes, aren't they? In the course of like more. A month or two.
Yeah, it depends how long their camp is and how much notice they have, but it could be very short. I mean, we'll take a break here.
Yeah, and then I want to hear what you have to say about that. We'll be right back. But you won't even notice the break. All right, good.
Quickest break ever. That was probably like 1 second for the listeners. Just those right together. So we were just talking about some fighters' cuts. Like, I mean, Conor McGregor is a household name for people for the most part. I don't know if anybody saw a picture of his most drastic weight cut, but the guy, he looked like a skeleton, right? Like sunken in cheekbones, just looks like a shell of himself to get down there. That's obviously, he only did that once, and I think that's pretty obvious why he would only do that one time. But there's very drastic cuts of, even 50 pounds for a fight. There's lots though. And then, they'll come back after weigh-ins, say 24 hours later, and they're back up that same amount of weight. So they walk into weigh-ins, weigh in at 145 or whatever, and walk into the fight at 190. That's very, very common practice for people.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And that's in all combat sports too. I think just from what I've been paying attention to lately, it sounds like most guys, especially top level guys that are career fighters, are choosing weight classes that are a little bit closer to their walking around weight and doing more of a gradual cut. Since now, once you become a professional and you're signed to an organization like the UFC or Bellator or something like that, you're going to have a fight contract, right? So they'll sign you to like a 5-fight contract, and you're going to have a pretty good idea of when you're going to be fighting throughout the year. So you can kind of plan for that and do more of a gradual cut, which would lead to you only needing to make like a 10-pound cut in a month or something like that near the end of it, instead of these very drastic last minute things, which I think are more on the amateur side of things, where you're kind of sitting by your phone waiting for that phone call that, hey, we got you somebody.
Right.
It's at this weight on this date. And you're like, shit, that's 3 weeks from now. And I'm 25 pounds over that weight class, and you have to cut it all back. But it happens.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, they're putting it all back on so fast that it just makes me wonder, like, I don't know, are they fully bouncing back from that?
Yeah.
I'm sure that, like, we talked about this, and I'm sure that they've just, and you'll know a little bit about this because you've been in this sport specifically yourself the past several months. But I'm assuming like this is kind of just one of those things that they just accept and say, like, I don't really care. Like, this is what I love. This is what I want to do. And like, I can appreciate that. It's just kind of, we're just speculating.
Yeah. Especially at the professional level, like that's their job, is to do that. So, and when you're signed to an organization like the UFC or Bellator, one of the bigger ones, TKO, even one of the more Canadian based ones, their doctors and training and their staff take amazing care of their fighters. It's more of a concern for the amateur. And then you could compare that to the maybe the audience that's listening to us more away from like a combat sports perspective, but more to like a bodybuilding or figure perspective. You find people trying to imitate a cut that a figure competitor or a bodybuilder competitor, like a professional that gets paid and makes money off of doing these cuts. They're trying to imitate that same thing for themselves for solely just a cosmetic and like a look that they're trying to achieve. And when there's not money or points or trophies or, a legacy that you're trying to leave on the line, like there's better ways to do it. And if you don't have the support of an educated professional team behind you to help you make the right decisions and educate you into the pros and cons and the yeses and the nos of this process, it could be very dangerous. And I think you have stuff to, really drive that home from like a science perspective.
Yeah, I was just kind of thinking about, now I'm kind of thinking more so about in the bodybuilding realm, because you brought that up, where like, let's just make this point clear, is that when they're on stage, like they are not in a healthy state.
They're not okay
at all. Like that is, like you're literally going to die if you spend much longer in that condition.
Yeah, and they'll tell you that if you ask them.
Yeah.
It's like when you can see someone's, striations in their butt cheeks, like that's as lean as it gets, and that's not a healthy place to be. That's not something to aim for.
No. Yeah, I mean, we know, like, as a male, like your testosterone goes way down. Like I was reading a study earlier today on this. It was just a case study on one individual. I think the testosterone went down by like, I forget the number now, but it was a ridiculous amount. Like, I don't know, from like, say, based on the measurements they were using, it would have been like from a 10, and I don't know, like there's different ways to measure it. I don't know what method they were using, but they went from like a 10 to a 2. Most people, when we see testosterone, most often you won't see a low number like that, again, because of these different methods that they use, but they were going from like a 10 to a 2, and then this particular person, again, this was just one, it was because it was a case study. They did bounce back. But again, this was like it was a young individual, like 25, 26 years old. So, probably much better able to adapt and deal with that stressor. But anyways, like as males, your testosterone is just going way down. Females, same thing, like massive kind of reorganization of all your sex hormones, not in a beneficial way. Like clearly they're going to be losing their period. They would not ever be able to reproduce in that state, in that physical condition. And that kind of brings up I think like a good point, is that if a female's ever kind of wondering, like, why can't I get pregnant? I think this is why it's important to always look at their history. Because like if they've gone through this constant cycle of dieting, if they were like previously constantly in bodybuilding shows and whatnot, that would be like a legit concern as to why they would be having difficulties conceiving.
Right.
But that's kind of another rabbit hole, but just wanted to mention that. There's a big change in like your stress hormones. So like when your body fat percentage is that low, when your calories are that low, like your cortisol is going to always be high. Adrenaline is always going to be high. So these are the hormones that like we feel these when we're stressed out, anxious. If like as a kid, when you were like going to get in trouble for something and you're just like sitting there shaking, that kind of thing, like this is the response that's always there when you're in that condition. So like you are always in this stressed out state. I guarantee their sleep is shit for that same reason. Stress is always going to be through the roof. Big change to hunger hormones and peptides. So leptin, this is going to be way down. So leptin is what stimulates satiety. So if you eat a massive meal, your leptin should increase to send a signal to your brain like, hey, we're full, we don't need any more energy. And then on the other hand, ghrelin, that's going to be way up to stimulate hunger, so that it's the opposite of leptin. And then we have like reorganization of all these other peptides. Not that they're really all that important, like CCK, GLP-1. Like they're all different signaling pathways that take place from like our gut to our brain, and are like very tightly linked to like also our adipose tissue, so our stored fat.
Mm-hmm.
So our stored fat, like I said before, is growing and shrinking, but as it's growing and shrinking, it's sending out its own signals. So it's actually influencing all these other signals that I mentioned. Thyroid hormone is another one. Like that's going to be way, way down. So this is why it can be a concern in terms of like hypothyroid, is because the problem with hypothyroid is your T3 is way, 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 way low. So T3 is the active hormone. It's, I mean, in very simple terms, it's responsible for your metabolic rate, essentially. So if your T3 is very low, your metabolic rate is going to be very slow.
Mm-hmm.
So when you go through this rapid cut, your T3 is going to go way down because your metabolism is going way down. Because again, like your body senses this low energy intake, so it goes into this survival mode, right? Like if it knows that you're consuming next to 0 calories, then it's not going to be burning through calories rapidly because you would just die. So it's like savoring these, like hanging on to these as much as it possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
So these are just some of the kind of changes and signals that are happening, and just some of the things that, like, again, over time, constantly doing this is what can really lead to some long-term health consequences.
Yeah, that's a lot. You simplified that, and it's like that's a laundry list of things. And I mean, if you're listening, trying to decide of whether or not you're going to try something like this, and you can't explain why each of those things that Chet just talked about are happening, and then also how to bridge that back to something that's a healthy level for you, then don't do it, because you don't fully understand what you're doing. So you shouldn't be doing it. Going in blind and hoping for the best, it's going to cost you so much in the long run.
Yeah.
You were talking that kind of way back at the start of the conversation about like people who are already low cal. I mean, making calorie cuts aren't going to work for them. I know we've talked about this just in like prepping for this episode, but you mentioned how Sandra's thinking like that person who's eating lower calorie, instead of cutting low calories, you can change what your intake is composed of, right? So choosing some ketogenic diet approach is what you're mentioning. So what's that all about?
This is really interesting. I just want to mention something else though that I forgot in kind of that last spiel, like as a take-home, like if you're, again, that was a lot, like if you're kind of just wondering what the hell all that means, I think in terms of like practical advice, I think if you are going through any type of like just weight cut or shred or whatever you want to call it, I think some key signs to look for would be like sleep is the biggest one. Like if you find that and I'm talking like this is just new symptoms, like this isn't something that's regular for you. So all of a sudden, you start to cut calories, wondering if you're doing things in a healthy, sustainable way. So one thing you would definitely want to look at is like your sleep. So if you find that your sleep onset, so the time it takes you to get to sleep at night, gets a lot longer, that's a pretty good indicator that you're cutting too aggressively. Because if you can't get to sleep at night, good sign that your cortisol is high. Cortisol high at nighttime, not normal, not a healthy thing, not what we want. So that's a good indicator. Another one, if you're waking up several times throughout the night, same thing. Pretty good indicator that you have some fluctuations in blood sugar, insulin, as well as cortisol. Again, another good indicator that you're just kind of not going about things the right way, because these are not normal, healthy approaches. If you're feeling like tired but wired, So that's similar to the sleep onset thing, but if you are kind of constantly feeling like sluggish and drained, but at the same time you have like, sort of short, quick bursts of energy, often feel jittery. This is the same idea in line with that heightened stress response. And then just like sex drive actually is another really, really big one. Because I said like your testosterone can go way down, and we know that like libido and sex drive and all that is going to go with that. So those are some pretty good kind of just real life signs that I would look for. And then like, not to toot my own horn, but these are some of the things that I'll include in my initial assessment with clients, just to kind of give me like more of a deeper look as to what's actually going on in their body.
Right. Yeah, those are easy things for everyone to check in on.
Yeah, and I think it's things that most people, they know right away, like whether or not that's going on. They just don't think anything of it.
Or choose to ignore it because it's not, for most people, it's not something that they're going to want to share with other people. It's
right.
Like, oh yeah, my sex drive is through
the
basement and can't fall asleep. And then I'm up for 2 hours at 3:00 in the morning and I put on Netflix because I can't fall back asleep. Like those aren't things that people like to talk about.
And especially in terms of nutrition, I think people just don't realize that there's a massive connection there. But anyways, so the keto thing is very interesting because a lot of big names, I've mentioned Layne Norton on here before. He's a good name to bring up again for this, is that all these big names claim and think that if you are doing a cut, so if you are trying to lose body fat, improve body composition, they say that the ratio of fat to carbohydrate intake when you are doing that cut absolutely does not matter. So what do I mean by that? I mean that they claim that if you are consuming 1,800 calories from a given number of carbohydrates and a higher number of fats, you are going to lose weight the exact same as person B would lose weight if they are consuming, again, that exact same amount of calories, which is a deficit, we're assuming, but they have those macros flipped. So they flip those carbs for fats. So someone losing weight by restricting fats versus someone losing weight by restricting carbs. So Layne in particular is someone who will say that there's absolutely no difference there.
It's just calories in, calories out.
Exactly, yeah. So calories in, calories out, energy expenditure, kind of classic laws of thermodynamics type thing. And notice I didn't see protein there because protein it's kind of separate from those other two macros. So the interesting thing about keto, though, that we're starting to see with some new research is that, so if you're losing weight, your resting metabolic rate is going to decrease. That's automatically going to happen because of that mechanism that I explained earlier. Because if your body senses a reduction in energy intake, it's thinking survival. I'm going to kind of savor these calories that I am receiving, so I'm not going to burn through them as fast. So on the other hand, let me back up. So why does that matter? Because you lose weight, your resting metabolic rate decreases. This is important for when you actually want to increase calories again. Because if you go from, let's say you go from 1,800 calories down to 1,500 calories, you're losing weight, but your resting metabolic rate is also going to decrease. Meaning that when you do decide to increase your calories again, your resting metabolic rate is still going to be lower than when it was before. So that's a disadvantage, right? Because it means that you're going to store more of that energy that you consume afterwards. Right. Hopefully that makes sense to people. Because
most of the time, we're going to store energy as fat. In the body. Not
totally, but usually. Yeah, so hopefully That kind of
I think
made sense.
so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So kind of the whole point of this is that, again, big name people saying that's automatically going to happen, no questions asked. And what the composition of your diet is, carbs or fats, is not going to affect that, that drop in resting metabolic rate.
Okay.
On the other hand, there's now studies showing that, okay, let's see what happens when we compare this ketogenic diet, calories matched, to whatever, like a higher carbohydrate diet. Again, calories matched is the important thing here.
And just higher than keto, which is,
Yeah.
I mean, pretty low.
Exactly, yeah. So what they're finding is that, again, we don't fully know why, but if you're doing a cut on a ketogenic diet, it seems to preserve your resting metabolic rate better than another diet. So it's very interesting. And I've recently read Lane's ebook. It's a very good book, by the way, like awesome, especially for this stuff, like just like classic, basic, like laws of kind of weight loss, weight regain. Amazing for all that stuff. But I mean, he clearly says in there, like over and over and over again, that calories in, calories out, that's all that matters. But I mean, these are new studies where they're matching calories and they're finding that the metabolic rate is just better preserved.
Right.
So to me, this is interesting because it seems like it could have a lot of potential for some of these people that we've already talked about, like the fighters who have to always cut weight, the people in the bodybuilding industry, whatever. Like, and I don't find it all that surprising personally when we consider the differences between like carbs and fats and what they actually do in the body.
Mm-hmm.
Like carbohydrates aren't an essential macronutrient, contrary to popular belief. Like you don't need those. Fats, you'll die without them.
Right.
And so, I mean...
Yeah, and you've explained multiple times.
Yeah, and so, I mean, that just kind of says it right there without going into too much detail.
Mm-hmm.
But I think like the one other thing before I forget is that the ketone body that you're making when you're in ketosis on a ketogenic diet, there's a couple different ones, but beta hydroxybutyrate is the major one. So again, remember with a ketogenic diet, you're basically switching your primary fuel source from glucose to these ketones. These ketones have like some incredible signaling mechanisms throughout the body. So this is kind of like an emerging field, is that not only are they an energy source, but they're almost acting like parcel carriers. Like they're delivering messages throughout to the rest of the body and to the brain. And it seems like these messages that they're delivering are most often extremely beneficial and like in some cases therapeutic. So like if you hear like ketogenic diet for cancer, keto for concussion, keto for epilepsy, like it's because of this ketone body. This is why this is happening. It's because these ketone bodies are signaling, like they're improving the health of our mitochondria, like they're reducing inflammation, they're increasing BDNF in the brain, they're increasing cell autophagy. Like it's actually pretty insane, like some of the mechanisms that these seem to be doing. And again, this is why like this field is blowing up right now. This is why people are looking into what are called exogenous ketones as a treatment for like especially neurological issues, Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's, ALS, concussion, you name it. Like they're looking into like literally just giving these as almost like a supplement form to patients in a hospital, giving them to patients to rapidly induce ketosis. So rapidly induce ketosis without having to go through the steps of a ketogenic diet or without having to go through a fast, because that will also kick you into ketosis. So just rapidly induce ketosis and then have these ketone bodies send these signals throughout the entire body. And I mean, again, like some of the research on these is pretty insane, like finding that it could even like improve recovery from chemotherapy, starve cancer cells in general, like just certain types of cancers, because a lot of cancers will feed off of glucose and can't use these ketones for energy, so it starves them. But yeah, so I mean, so I guess when you see these claims like ketogenic diet, that and this, there's definitely something to that. And the other one like very fascinating thing that I forgot to mention that is very much in line with this preservation of resting metabolic rate. So another thing when it comes to metabolic rate, and we've said this many times, the more muscle you have, the bigger your furnace, right? So the more muscle you have, the faster you're going to burn through calories. So when you are going through a cut, restricting calories, a major goal, if not like number one priority for you, should be to maintain muscle mass as best as you can. It seems to be impossible when cutting weight to maintain 100% of your muscle mass. Like it seems like if you're restricting energy, that it's kind of automatic that you're going to lose at least a little bit of muscle mass, which would also decrease your metabolic rate. Mm-hmm. But so another side effect of these ketone bodies, when you have ketone bodies circulating in your blood, they preserve muscle, like literally protect muscle from catabolism. So like from breakdown of whatever. So they've done studies where they'll give, and they've done this in humans, they'll give patients something called lipopolysaccharide. I don't have time to go into what that is. I use this in my thesis, but anyways, they'll give this to individuals in a study. This is like a massive inflammatory trigger, which is supposed to break down your muscle. Mm-hmm. Well, they find that if they give this inflammatory stimulus, but then they also induce ketosis, it basically blocks this effect and preserves the muscle. So it's fascinating stuff. Like, so now think about people who are on bed rest, whether after surgery or because of different immobilities. If they have high enough levels of ketones, well, they could maintain muscle. Obviously, that's going to be therapeutic.
Right.
Elderly people, like you name it, the list goes on and on and on. Mm-hmm. So one more thing. You have to be above 2 millimolar to get that effect. That's how it looks right now. Mm-hmm. So this is just kind of another like red flag for people to look for. Exogenous ketones are getting big. So I mentioned these earlier, but there's ones that are more accessible on the market that you can just buy at a regular supplement store. So right. Ketone salts. Mm-hmm. So these are supposed to be same thing. You're supposed to be able to take these and then they induce rapid ketosis. And they'll often claim like, muscle preservation. So they'll tell people to take these if they're doing like fasted workouts, whatever. You just have to be careful because yes, while ketones seem to have a muscle preserving effect, it looks like you have to have above 2 millimolar ketones in your blood. And it's pretty tough to reach. Like I've experimented with these before and then pricked my finger and measured ketones in my blood. And I haven't got anywhere near that yet. Mm-hmm. I can get there from fasting for like 24 hours plus, but so you just have to be careful with those marketing claims. Right. But still,
it's the supplement itself.
Yeah. But still, I mean, ketones in general, massive potential.
Yeah.
Concussion is the biggest, most interesting one to me. We don't have time to go into it, but.
Yeah, it can be a whole episode in itself, I think.
Yeah.
Since that's something that you got a lot of info about. Right. Yeah, so I mean, the big takeaway from that whole thing, all of that information that you just shared with people is it's all about preserving that basal metabolic rate as much as possible as you go through this cut. And it's not going to happen by drastically cutting calories and increasing your exercise.
Right.
If there's nothing, right? Like, listen to that spiel that Chet just had 3 or 20 times, right? To get all the little nuggets out of there because it's all valuable. But the kind of the headline of that whole thing is you got to preserve that because that's what's going to preserve your muscle mass and
actually that
bounce back.
I guess that kind of ties nicely into what you said earlier on is that people need to realize like, hey, maybe I need to bump the conditioning and aerobic work back and focus on strength work. Mm-hmm. That's a massively important thing right there too. Yeah. Like you said, like if someone's trying to cut weight, don't go crazy on the cardio, thinking that's how you're going to get cut. You need to keep squatting, keep doing slow strength work to maintain that muscle because of what you just said,
Mhm.
maintain that metabolic rate.
Yeah, I would say like with clients I work with that fit this sort of demographic, this group, have similar goals to kind of what we're talking about today. They don't believe me. Yeah, so I think like the biggest, I guess, pushback or I want to say argument because it's just a conversation. It's not really an argument, but people don't really believe me sometimes when it's like, oh, I want to lose weight, and then they see their programming and it's it's all strength stuff. That's because that's what you need.
Yeah.
I'm not going to give you what you want, right? Otherwise, don't pay me. Don't pay a coach if you're just going to do what you want. That's kind of silly, right? The coach is going to give you what you need, and what they know is not going to do any harm is what's going to help you, preserve what your body needs in order to be healthy long term. And I mean, you would get the same, like if people are going to you, it's not going to be a blanket like, oh, every male that you work with is going to have to cut 500 calories from their diet, and that's what's going to get them to their goal weight. Or every female that comes and sees you, you're not going to say, hey, yeah, let's try 1,200 calorie a day diet, not knowing where they're at right now. I mean, the biggest thing is if your coach isn't like understanding where you're at to start, then you should probably get a new coach, because then it's just going to be blanket statements and stuff like that, right? I mean, the biggest thing, and what was hard for me just to wrap my head around when I was first starting was to meet people where they're at for real, right? Like not where I wanted them to be, and just kind of get mad when people would ask questions. It's like, this person just isn't sure and doesn't trust me fully. That's why they're questioning what I'm doing, and that's my job to earn their trust over time and then allow them to see success in whatever it is that they want to accomplish. And that goes from everyone from a competitive athlete in any sport that you work with to somebody who's doing this to be healthy, whatever that means to them. So, but if you're crashing them and just putting their BMR through the basement and messing with all these hormones and pathways and all that stuff, you're not doing anybody any good.
I think we should wrap things up soon, but I think people think you lose weight through sweat, I think. Right? Would you agree?
I never heard it put that way before, but yes, 100% I would agree with you. If they're not sweating during the workout, this is the only conversation, this is a good point. This is the only conversation, and it didn't click until right now, that I've had so far in this latest cycle of the gym. We're 3 weeks in. It's like after those longer 20-minute pieces that for me are like, they're programmed in a way that people can't go hard. Right? Like I have it set up that even if somebody wanted to go as hard as they possibly could for 20 minutes, they just can't, because you throw movements in there and transitions and things like that force people to slow down. And that's where I like to nerd out on stuff like that.
That's
right?
totally but you've been programming this for me lately, and it's definitely some of the genius behind it. Because it's so true. It's like, man, I'm going to fly on this. And you literally just can't.
You can't.
You just can't.
Even if you wanted to. Right? So like I program 80%, but not everyone listens to that, right? So it's like, how do I set up the workout that people can exceed a jog pace? And that's kind of in the design of the whole thing. But when I program stuff like that, or harder, or like longer pieces that are low to moderate intensity at the highest, but they're long enough that people are sweating like crazy, right? They got a puddle of sweat under them. They're like, oh, I want more of that. Summer's coming. And I'm like, no. Right? It's like, hold on a second. All this strength stuff that you guys are doing right now, rebuilding your bodies, that's what's going to benefit you the most in this endeavor or your pursuit of that quote unquote beach bod, which I would never promote it that way, but you know what I mean? Like, but so funny that the opposite thing, the thing that isn't going to get them there, is what people think is going to get them there. And what you said, like people think sweat is like you lose weight through sweat, is like the greatest quote I've ever heard in my life. Yeah. That's a perfect way to put it.
Well, another good way, man, we just keep going. Another kind of good way to picture this is, so I mean, first of all, think about if you're thinking weight loss, fat loss, you have to think oxygen consumption,
Right.
Not sweat. Think oxygen consumption. So what can I like relate that to? Well, think about a truck towing a heavy ass load, like a boat or a trailer, whatever, versus driving really fast. What burns more fuel?
Right.
So, squatting, heavy ass weight versus a bunch of conditioning.
That's right. That's a great way to put it too. Yeah, totally. All right, we better shut it down before we get down another rabbit hole. All right.
We got some exciting shit coming though soon.
Oh yeah. New look. You won't even recognize us.
No.
Freshen up.
Happy to say you'll no longer have to stare at that ugly ass cover art picture of the gym.
You did great. It looks good. It's just going to be made a lot better.
I'm so techie.
Yeah, we're going to get onto the YouTube machine.
Yep.
Have some, eventually some video podcasts, especially for when we have guests. So you get to see them awkwardly talking to the microphone.
Some people like that.
Yeah, goes a long way. Cool.
All right.
See you next time.